Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our first legislative update of the 2026 legislative session. Before we begin, I just want to take a moment to make sure everyone can hear us all right and see the slides okay. If you wouldn't mind just raising your hand so we know the tech is working as it intended. All right, I see some hand raised. You can go ahead and put them down and we'll get started. First, for some logistics, LOC is using the Zoom webinar format for these updates for the first time. So it looks a little different than previous years. We want to make sure you know how to ask questions and where to go. First and foremost, you'll notice the Q&A function at the bottom right of your screen. You might need to hit the three dots and the circle that says more to see it, but it is here. We'll take questions throughout the conversation today, and we encourage, as you think of a question, to put it in that Q&A feature. Staff may answer it in writing, we may answer it verbally, but that will help us organize our time together and keep things moving slowly. As dictated here, we'll answer questions mostly through the Q&A feature. If we have time at the end, we'll get to live questions. There's a lot of content for us to get through, and we want to make sure you get the information that's most important to cities. Before we talk about specific bills, I want to give you the landscape of where we are in the legislative session. This is a short session, and as the name indicates, it is very short. It is just 35 days, a bit of a roller coaster to get through the over 280 bills that have been introduced. As you can see, we've already hit two key milestones. We've started the session and we've received the revenue forecast that tells legislators how much to expect of resources. So that is an important piece to look to, and certainly we'll revisit this at every meeting so you understand where we are in the session. The next big deadline is Monday. That is the deadline for bills to be scheduled for a vote or a work session out of their policy committee. So if a bill is not scheduled by 12:01 a.m. on Tuesday the 10th, that bill can no longer be considered for the remainder of this legislative session. There are a few key exceptions to that in the rules and revenue committees, but for the most part, this applies to the majority of bills we're looking at. And again, just to give you a bit more of a landscape of where we are in this legislative session, there's a few key issues the legislature is taking up. You may have heard of some pretty dramatic budget impacts related to H.R. 1 that Congress passed over the summer. That is impacting the state's revenue in terms of how much collection will come in, and also impacting the resources required to run state-run federal programs like SNAP or food stamps, Medicare, Medicaid, those sorts of programs. That is a big topic of conversation this legislative session, and we'll talk more about some of that later, but also a big topic of conversation is related to the referral of the transportation package and when that vote might occur. So those are some big issues that are taking up space this legislative session, as well as addressing federal action. So that includes immigration enforcement and impacts to community, as well as changes to access in healthcare. So a lot happening there, not a lot that's necessarily directly impacting cities outside of those two measures. As I mentioned, there's over 285 bills that have been introduced this legislative session. Your lobby team is tracking about a little over 55% of those bills and continuing to analyze the new bills that dropped just this week. All right, and without further ado, I want to start, we'll start with transportation as the key topic that I'll talk through. Transportation, of course, is a big topic that the LOC has been focused on for quite some time. We're working closely this session to maintain the 50-30-20 allocation of the state highway fund that funds much of what cities do in regards to transportation. There were some early concerns that allocation would be used to balance ODOT's budget at the beginning of this legislative session. We no longer have those concerns, thankfully, and are now working on other issues this legislative session. The biggest issue is one that you hopefully saw in the bulletin that came out a little bit ago. If you haven't seen it already, House Bill 4085 creates an autonomous vehicle framework for the state of Oregon and preempts any local regulations. So it provides some basic standards for autonomous vehicles and stops cities from being able to do any type of basic time, place, manner regulations or anything of that sort. LOC is opposed to this legislation. We're working with a team of local government partners to remove those preemptions in the bill. And we encourage all of you on this call to review the sign-on letter, send me your logo if you'd like to add on to it, and send in written testimony so the legislature understands why it is so important with this new and emerging technology for local governments to have the tools in their toolbox to address emerging issues that come up. So we're excited to be moving forward with a coalition package and hopefully pause the conversation on this bill so we can come to the table and craft a solution that works not just for state government, but also for local government. We've had successes in doing this in the House Transportation Committee with House Bill 407. This bill regulates micromobility devices as well as creates a pilot for milk trucks on the road. LOC is neutral on that part, and we are moving to neutral on the micromobility devices. The bill as drafted included limitations to our ability to prohibit micromobility devices in certain areas. There is an amendment being drafted to reduce our concerns, which will move LOC to neutral on that bill. There's other key bills moving through the legislative session regarding transportation. These don't impact cities as much. I won't go over them in as much detail, but to highlight, there's a bill that would create a task force around transit funding in which cities would have a seat. There's efforts to phase in per mile road user charges and studies of those charges. No direct impact to cities, but of course, a large conversation as the reliance on gas tax and funding our transportation system declines. So we're watching that conversation closely, but it does not directly impact cities. And last, certainly not least, the Senate Transportation Committee has a package of bills to address ODOT accountability. Again, these do not directly impact cities. We're watching closely to understand how they might impact STIP projects or other key initiatives cities work through. I'm not seeing any questions in regards to transportation in the Q&A feature. If you have them, please feel free to put them in. But for the sake of time, I'm going to move us forward to talk a little bit about revenue and finance. And this is where I'll do half of this and I'll pass it over to Scott Winkles to close us out. First, I mentioned at the top, there was a new revenue forecast that was released. It shows a slightly better picture than what we saw from the last revenue forecast. So revenue is slightly up. The risk of a recession is slightly down. State economists believe we have about a 20% risk of a recession. And the returns coming in from tax receipts kind of match what they expected to see last time. So we're seeing a stabilization of the revenue forecast post HR1 analysis. And are hopeful that that stabilization continues. Also in the bulletin this week was a link to the full revenue forecast. It includes economic factors that might be important or helpful for you all to see. The other piece I mentioned related to HR1, there are conversations around disconnecting from the federal tax code. This is something Oregon has done in a number of different ways throughout the years we've been connected to the federal tax code. So we first connected to the federal tax code in 1997. We've disconnected parts a number of times throughout the years. Given the impacts of HR1 to our revenue in the connection to the federal tax code, the legislature is considering areas to disconnect. This, of course, is a controversial issue as it would impact taxpayers as well. So we're watching that closely to see what happens with state revenue, but the revenue streams that impact cities are not directly impacted by HR1. All right, and I see a hand raised. Cindy, we take questions at the end of the presentation. If you have questions, written questions, we'll take those now, but if not, we'll run through the slides and come back at the very end. All right, and Scott, are you online? I see you here. I will turn it over to Scott to close out our revenue and finance update.
Good morning, everyone. So we got some great news yesterday. House Bill 4148. This is the local act. This is our Transient Lodging Flexibility Act. Will be heard in House Revenue at 3 o'clock on Monday. And so you can expect to see a full legislative alert come out this afternoon from us, asking you to reach out to your legislators, get your talking points, your one pager. We are We are working on a vote count for the House of Representatives right now. We, I keep that number between my ears most of the time, but I would say it's close. I think we're in pretty good shape, but not exactly where I'd like it to be right now. We are still accumulating allies, and that's always good in this business, so that's helpful. What the bill will do is allow, if your tax was imposed after 2003, it would allow 60% of the revenue generated to be used for government services and sort of meeting the needs of your communities. And then 40% of that money would then go to tourism promotion. The current split is 70% of the funds are devoted to, must go to tourism promotion. The tourism promotion, and 30% is only available to for governmental services. And so what we have learned and what we know from both our experience of talking to you all and from our polling and our focus group work is that Oregonians are fully aware that they are picking up the tab for tourists. So we have a bill. We're going to fix that. It's up on Tuesday. It's up on Monday. We'll be asking you to get testimony in, even if it's brief. Submit it online. That would be great. We know that the Restaurant and Lodging Association is very active on this bill, and they have their members activated, and we're going to do that as well. So more to come on this bill, but look for our alert. And I'm
Scott,
seeing a question.
Yeah, Scott, before we move on, we have a question in the chat. This is clearly coming from an insider who knows there's two transient lodging tax bills this session. And the question is there concern over the fact that there are two? And Scott, if you wouldn't mind kind of describing the difference between those two bills.
So there are two, yeah, correct. There are two bills. One is impacting the state transient lodging tax, and that would be a 1.5% increase on the state tax that would go for wildlife purposes. There is some enthusiasm for that bill in the building. Quite a bit of that, some of those funds would go to wolf-related issues. I'm not entirely certain what those are. We don't have a whole lot of wolves in cities. Never had to worry about that. It does. I do expect that bill to pass. I don't think that there is a strong relationship between those two. I think people understand that this is a very distinct issue, and we're not talking about the other bill. We're letting the proponents of that bill do their thing, and they're letting us do ours, and we're going to do that count. I think that's our plan. We're going to talk positively about our bill and let the other folks do the same. And to the best of my knowledge, the proponents of the 1.5% have not disparaged our legislation. So any other questions? I can't see from my end, so. Okay. We do have a few other bills to talk about. I'm going to burn through these pretty quickly because I do have a late breaking development for you that I think you really want to hear on ethics bills. But we had a lot of conversation this week on general government bills and impacting public safety and PERS and HR issues. And so Senate Bill 1563, this would allow people to bring a private right of action with attorney's fees attached to against a public body for a violation of a right guaranteed under the Oregon Constitution. We've opposed the bill. We believe it's duplicative of current remedies that are available. It would also be profoundly expensive on cities and would represent a significant shift in funds that are currently being used for public services towards attorney's fees. So more to come on that one. This bill does have me concerned. 1569. This bill would add certain career fields to PERS, OPSERP, the Tier 3, police and fire. Every session, we see another bite of people trying to get added to either the creation of a new category or getting added to OPSERP P&F. It's a little bit the same way a beaver eats a tree. So eventually this just a little bit of a time, but we know how that ends. 4094 testified against this bill. This bill would require the employer to pay out with the amendment, 300 hours of accrued vacation time. That's certainly excess of what most cities do. It would be a significant financial hit. And we also bargained this, and we have some local control concerns here. And then we continue to work on House Bill 4138. This bill involves Oregon's law enforcement's current interaction with the federal government and the way that they are operating. We have cities all over the map on this one, but we are engaged to ensure amendments are workable for us, so and can be implemented and enforceable. So there we are. And then we also have we did get word yesterday, or first thing in the morning yesterday, we got our ethics bills first read into the House chambers. We have our serial meeting fix. That bill is 41. Sorry, I just sent this. 4161 will be the food fix bill. So that is you've heard us talk about the hot dog opinion, where the OGEC opined that the city of Beaverton was not allowed to give hot dogs a management function thing, and that was an abuse of office. We have a bill to fix that. And then we will also have the bill legislation to address the serial meetings issues. That bill does need a technical amendment, but we expect that heard next week in House rules. So stand by for that. It's been a long road to get that introduced. We've been negotiating that for the last 6 months. And I think we're in a good spot. So good news today.
Thanks, Scott. And before we move on, we have some questions coming in through the QA feature. The first one being related to House Bill 4094. What is the motivation for this bill, and does it have traction?
First question, I don't know. Second question, I'm not sure. We're moving very quickly here, and I don't know what's going to get on the lifeboat right now. We'll know. Posting deadline is Monday, and so we'll know if that has a problem. We haven't been asked for a fiscal on 4094, which is typically what would happen. We do fiscal impact statements on most bills that go through the legislature. That hasn't occurred yet, which is hopeful. However, on 1569, we have been asked to do a fiscal on that legislation, and we know that's scheduled for Monday. So it would be 4094 is something that pops up frequently. I think that's the first time I've seen it get a hearing. So I would never treat a bill that's got on a calendar as anything but alive, like we can convert otherwise.
Scott, we've got a few questions for you, so we'll pause here to get through these. Does House Bill 4138 require masking or unmasking of law enforcement officials?
So it requires it requires officers in most instances to not mask, but there are exemptions written into the bill, and there's further amendments coming, is my understanding. If they're masking because for officer safety reasons. So for instance, if it's cold out, you're out in the gorge and you're doing traffic, that a balaclava is appropriate, although most agencies expect that the officer would pull that down when they initiate contact with the motorist. It would also be allowed to mask when it's OSHA required, when they're protecting, if they're concerned about a projectile coming in, like if you had a riot situation, they would still be able to mask and helmet, those sorts of things, but not certainly for day-to-day operations. The attempt is to try to apply that to federal agencies. And the belief is that if it's not applied, masking in the way that we're seeing on TV is not a practice that is engaged in Oregon law enforcement. There are very rare circumstances where an officer would conceal their identity, but they do that's specifically for their safety, depending on the sort of person that's being arrested. But the belief is that we have to apply it to everybody if we want to apply it to the feds, and that's still, I'm not a lawyer, so I haven't heard I think there are some differing opinions as to how successful that would be. The other parts of the bill were concerning to us and have been taken out. So there was a private right of action with punitive damages and attorney's fees for things where there's an existing remedy. Those sorts of things have come out mostly, although injunctive relief is still in the bill.
Thanks, Scott. And there's a couple questions in the chat here about the bill number for the serial meeting proposal. So other lobbyists are
Serial
going and grabbing
meetings,
that. Oh,
yeah, it is 4177. And 4161 is provides an exception to the prohibition on use of office so that you could accept food from your agency. And so, and they also threw in a couple of, if you're scrolling through the first readings from yesterday, they also threw in some placeholder bills simply related to ethics. So we have some other vehicles if we need them. But right now, those are the two that we're focused on. There's a third in the mix that I haven't seen that would require the governor's appointee to the OGEC to have local government experience. So we would be supporting that as well. Yeah.
thank you, Scott. I'm not seeing any more questions. Are we ready to move to the next?
Sure.
All right, Alexandra.
Hi, folks. Just so that you could potentially actually see me. We'll see if I can actually get it to go down. Hi, folks. I'm Alexandra Ring. I'm the Housing and Land Use Lobbyist from the League of Oregon Cities if we have not met before. I'm going to do a brief rundown of some of the most kind of high level, biggest importance housing and land use bills, along with economic development. If you have more in-depth questions or bills that I haven't talked about, reach out. First one up is going to be HB 4037. This is the Omnibus Housing Bill for the House Housing Committee. It has a lot of different changes in it, from like disaster related landlord tenant issues to preservation to just a lot of different things, but it also includes some pretty significant changes for cities. In the base bill, you will see some changes related to HAPO. I am very pleased to say that as of the -6, those are being removed. We have agreed with the sponsors of the committee and the developers that right now is not the appropriate time to give HAPO some additional authority, that they really need to be, we need to evaluate kind of what the work product is and see things stood up more strongly before we even remotely consider that. There are some pretty big issues in HAPO's workflow. Next up, we'll do sections 18 and 19, which is regarding those pesky land use shot clocks, those land use application shot clocks. Those sections are also going away. Which brings us to the final one that is likely to stick around in the final bill, which is section 17, and this is regarding administerial decision-making for permits. The section expressly denies a city can require a public hearing. A property owner or developer could opt into a public hearing if they're doing a development, but it is not required. It changes noticing requirements and does some other things to just kind of I think what the advocates would say is decrease the impact of NIMBYism on housing. It does have significant impacts on local control, which is a concern for LOC. We are working with the bill sponsor to kind of narrow that section and see what changes we can get to the language to make it A, implementable for cities, and B, really lessen the impact of this. But it seems unlikely at this juncture that we're going to see that taken out. I think right now among legislators, there's not a lot of love lost for goal one. So it's a really tough conversation to have that our communities feel rather keenly, but at the legislative level, it's a tough one to get out of there. Next up is HB 4035. This is one-time UGB expansions program update. Many of you will have followed the conversation in 2024 with SB 1537, which created a program for one-time UGB expansions. We've only seen 3 cities be able to use that: Bend, Bay City, and Eagle Point. The legislature thinks 3 is too few, 2 years into a program. So they are revising and making some changes to to make it more usable for cities. If you have questions, if your city has looked at doing a one time before but has not been eligible, um, then please reach out. I'm happy to provide you with some more information about what exactly is being contemplated there. I see Ryan's question in the chat, City of Rogue River, HB 4082. It does not require that cities expand for senior or low income mobile home parks kind of a thing. It is purely an option that if you're going to use the expansion that is contemplated in both 4035 and SB 1537 from a couple sessions ago, that you could do it with fewer criteria if you were going to do it for senior housing or manufactured home parks. Entirely city option. No one's being forced to do anything. You still have the option to use the 1537 process. Really just giving folks a greater selection of ways to expand to include more housing within their UGB. It does come with affordability requirements and all of that. But happy to talk through that if anyone has any further questions. HB 4108, non-contiguous annexation. It would allow non-contiguous annexation if the territory is served by some level of city services. I think what level of city services is currently up for great debate. This is really particularly looking out at a situation in the city of Eugene and some of the territory that is within their UGB but has not been annexed that receives city services, and really looking for ways to bring more of those homeowners into the UG or into the city because they've had a lot of challenges there. I will say this bill is probably not well suited to be a statewide bill. Um, we continue to have conversations with the bill sponsors about what it means to make this functional. Currently, it has become a city option where the city may annex these properties, but it probably requires some further narrowing to actually make it work between the cities, counties, and special districts. Next up, just because I've gotten a lot of questions about this one, we have SB 1521, which is a inclusionary housing program. The bulk of the bill applies only to the city of Portland, and then the rest of the bill applies to only the Portland metropolitan statistical area, so the Portland MSA. So pretty much everyone within that kind of metro area, we'll say loosely, and make some changes to what they could do if they were to implement an inclusionary housing or inclusionary zoning program. It's my understanding at this time that no one other than the city of Portland is even remotely considering one. It's kind of an odd bill. I'm going to be very frank, it probably does not work particularly well. But it's definitely a tricky one to navigate considering it's primarily targeting a program that one city operates. Next up, we'll switch to ECDev. I've got two
Alexandra, before we move to
Yes.
ECDev, just want to get back to Ryan's question. He asked specifically if the league was taking a position on House Bill 4082 or 4180 or 4108.
Yes. So we are supportive of 4082 primarily because it is purely local option. But then on 4108, we are neutral and kind of strongly pointing the advocates towards maybe there's a better fix for their specific local problem. Okay, we'll move on to ECDev. We've got two ECDev packages, and they have pretty strong overlap between them. So SB 1586, this is a package from Senator Solomon that's been worked on very closely with the city of Hillsborough and Washington County because it has some specific portions um, that are related to the city of Hillsborough and Washington County and some UGB expansions. But overall, it deals with how E-zones are designated, how those are operated, what kind of fees and permits, tax abatements for purchase of new equipment, all of those kinds of things are included in this bill as well. Similarly, in HB 4084, you'll see some things about a joint permitting council. that talks about really state level permits required for industrial use. Think your DEQ permits, your water permits, all of that good stuff, creating a more streamlined process for those. You'll see very similar, if not the same, or E-zone changes between the two in the final bill. And then additionally, you'll see $40 million for the Industrial Site Loan Fund, which is a revolving loan fund for industrial site readiness. These two really play off each other. We're not really sure which one's going to pass or if both are going to pass with kind of a package of changes shared between the two of them. It really depends kind of how things shake out as session goes on. That's it for me. If there's any other questions, happy as always to chat with folks, etc. My email inbox and phone are always open.
Thank you, Alexander. We'll be heading to Greg next, and while we head to him, I'll point out, uplift a question that came through the chat. These slides will be posted on our website today under the legislative updates webpage. So we have a webpage specifically for these webinars, likely where you got the link to join. We'll be putting the slides under there once they're complete.
Thank you. Ready? All right. I will try to be quick. There are a handful of energy bills. Oh, actually, first of all, for those of you who haven't met, my name is Greg Miller. I'm new at the league. I started in September and have taken over the energy, environment, telecom, and utilities portfolio. So here to talk to you about energy and telecom issues. A couple bills have come up related to energy resilience, adding to the grid / hardening the grid. That is Senate Bill 1526, which is the Forge Act. Sets up a not-for-profit board at the Oregon Department of Energy that is charged with seeking grant opportunities, other monies that help entities with environmental projects, getting green building going. And then that board spins off into a not-for-profit outside of ODO once they get set up. So ODO won't have any connection to them once they're established. But this establishes basically a green bank for cities to apply for loans for energy creating public works. Supported this bill on Monday. Have a good sense that it will pass. There is an amendment coming that the Oregon municipal electricity users or utilities are going to have added that just makes it crystal clear on what this bill does and who's impacted. Senate Bill 1582 is really kind of similar in terms of trying to create more resilience for the grid. This simply codifies what is current programs at the major utilities relating to dispersed power plants and how to include those into the electrical grids that they currently run. Aggregators will be used to incentivize people or recruit people into the program. And we expect pretty good response to that. There's some pretty exciting things happening with people's personal wind turbines, solar arrays, smart thermostats, and other things in your house that are creating energy efficiency. House Bill 4032, I'll gloss over a little bit. This is the state looking at the critical infrastructure in the city of Portland. All of the state's emergency fuels are stored in one place. Which creates significant concerns when you think about natural disasters or, God forbid, terrorist incident. So the state is looking at how to geographically disperse emergency fuel stores around the state. One of the things we really looked for in there was anything related to preemption, and there's not. So we're really happy to kind of track this bill to see where it goes without the fear of somebody getting a fuel storage system cited in their city with no recourse. Let's see. House Bill 4031 expedites the siting of renewable energy facilities. This basically takes away some of the permitting processes at the state. It does not take away any right-of-way control from cities, and it doesn't preempt cities. So just excited to see expediting new energy generation. And then finally, House Bill 4055, if we want to switch into the cybersecurity / telecom world, is a bill that was up this morning. It sought to mandate basically all small jurisdictions reports to the state CIO in the event of a cybersecurity attack. It also set up a portal that the state CIO would manage, and then information sharing permission that he would have based on the cybersecurity incident. LOC opposed that bill this morning in committee with some ideas on amendments that might make it a little bit more palatable. We understand the intent behind the bill is just a notification to the state, because there isn't anything formally right now that the state is notified in the instance of a cyber attack. So still not sure if we'll amend this bill this session. The chief proponents reached out to me after the hearing and have talked about potentially doing amendments next week, or possibly dealing with this in the interim. So more to come on that. Happy to answer any questions on this facet of my slide.
Thanks, Greg. It looks like we have one question in the chat for you. Anything in Senate Bill 1526 that specifically affects cities that provide electrical services?
No, there's not. I believe that this is purely a green bank for cities to go apply for resources.
Well, I'm not seeing any additional questions for you. We'll switch over.
There
Do you have
were,
anything else?
yeah, there were a couple bills that were on Scott's slides that I didn't see there. Were those moved to another slide?
Oh, I'm not seeing them. Do you want to go through those and we'll add them before we put them on the website?
Yeah, next Monday morning, there is a bill, I think it's 1566. I apologize, it's not right in front of me. But no, it's a different number. I'll confirm that with the group. But recreational liability will be up. This week, Senator Floyd Prozanski had his own recreational liability bill. Senate Bill 1517 only covered ski resorts or skiing industry. The bill that we will support, maybe 1586 on Monday, is broad, all-encompassing, has been brought forward by the recreational community in the state of Oregon. So we are supporting that bill Monday, and we'll put testimony on the record and comments on the record as well. The other bill on Monday morning is Senate Bill 1566, and that relates to prevailing wage in housing projects, especially affordable housing. Exempts a broad new category of housing from or affordable housing from prevailing wage. We've heard from members across the state that this issue is the single most important issue related to developing new housing in Oregon. And so we're really trying to focus on this bill as it relates to easing some of that financial stress on putting together an affordable housing plan. I think those were the only two that weren't on this slide, but again, happy to answer questions on those.
Thank you, Greg. And we'll be sure to add those to slides so folks have those links when this is on the website. So look out for that. And if you do have additional questions for Greg or general questions, feel free to put those in the chat. We have just one more slide of bills to go through, and I'll turn it over to Michael.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Nicole. It's good to be back on these Friday calls and update you all. So thanks for your time. So just a quick update. The first day of session, February 2nd, was Water Day at the Capitol. Saw a number of folks down connecting with their legislators. And right out the bat, we had a hearing on House Bill 4005, which establishes a Water Professionals Appreciation Week in Oregon. It will be the first week of October this year going forward every year. And had a work session quickly, and this bill will be up for a vote in the House next week. So moving pretty quickly. We did have one no vote on the committee, and the member generally doesn't support sort of events like this that create days. But I think it raised an important question when I went to follow up with their office, and that is, this doesn't go far enough. And I think it's a good opportunity to talk about why we have a Water Professionals Appreciation Week going forward. I think you all are acutely aware of the importance of infrastructure and the water professionals that help maintain that infrastructure. This is really to help frame conversations long term, to get a hold of that narrative, and to really say, this ties to one of our top 9 priorities, operator and training. We have a whole host of folks retiring, and we need to train up the next generation of the water workforce. And so there's a tie into infrastructure, but definitely keep you updated on that. But this bill will likely sail through the Senate as well. The second bill, I want to give you a quick update, is Senate Bill 1585. This is Senator Manning from the Eugene area wanted to bring back this bill. It passed last year in the House with only one no vote, hugely bipartisan support. But what this will do is it will reduce the grant match for several programs related to infrastructure for cities population 20,000 less. This bill is up for a hearing on Monday morning at 8 a.m. And we're continuing to have conversations with stakeholders to address some concerns, but Senator Manning is clear he wants this bill to go. It's one of his top bills, this priority. So we're tracking it through the process and happy to answer any questions if there are any. But thank you, Nicole.
Thanks, Michael. I'm not seeing any questions. So we have one general question in the chat, and at least one hand was up earlier in the presentation. So before we go to that, I do want to just remind you all of your LOC lobby team. Our contact information is on the website. We're here and happy to answer questions and provide information about the legislative process and the legislative session. And actually, before we get to general questions, it looks like we have a question coming in for you, Michael, regarding Senate Bill 1585, asking if that will apply to our Oregon Parks and Rec construction grants.
Thank you for the discussion. Actually, having a discussion with Senator Manning right after this call to work through some amendments. Right now, I believe that is the plan, but we're going to discuss those details here in about 30 minutes.
And a follow-up question still on 1585. What are any questions you have on the bill?
I don't know that I understand. What are any questions? Yeah,
Mindy, if you wouldn't mind.
that would be helpful to want to.
Yeah, and Mindy has a general question for anyone on the lobby team. Are there any surprise bills of concern this session, like the striking workers bill? So I would just say, as it relates to the transportation and wildfire portfolios, nothing concerning that was a surprise. We knew some of these other bills that we had concerns with were coming, but I might pause and see if any folks have any additional questions, and then we'll go back to the 1585 question. So any other folks have thoughts about surprising bills this session or things we didn't expect to come forward? And Scott, I know you have quite a few, so I'll turn to you first.
Well, I think there were a couple of bills that people didn't come to us beforehand, and that's kind of a process foul in our business. So I wasn't expecting to hear about the PERS bill. However, what I am watching closely is we have placeholder bills, and that is a bill that is relating to a broad topic, but it's usually defined. It's a one paragraph bill, usually with a study attached to it. And that bill can be cut and stuffed and amended into any number of things. And so that's where I'm looking out for surprises. So a placeholder bill is sort of like could be somebody waiting in the tall grass to pounce, or they could just be making sure they can be flexible if something comes up that we need to address. So yeah. Generally they scare me in the short session.
I don't think you're alone in that, Scott. Anyone else want to talk about any surprise bills?
I think HB 4037, which is that housing omnibus, was definitely not one, it's short session. We're seeing a lot of bills that weren't particularly well worked ahead of time. It was a little surprising to see exactly kind of the breadth of the legislation. We knew that something was coming, but we didn't receive the exact language until about 2 weeks before. And certainly the exact language we're having a lot of drafting errors in the legislature right now, at least in my portfolio. So that's been quite the problem to navigate, is a lot of bills are coming back radically different than perhaps the sponsors intended in ways that are perhaps not good.
Right, I'm not. Oh, Greg, did you want to jump in on that question?
Yeah, I did. So a bill that wasn't necessarily surprised, but Senate Bill 1566 relating to prevailing wage on affordable housing projects. Not surprised it was introduced, but surprised at the attention that it's getting from individuals across the aisle. Prevailing wage is not an issue that you see Democrats defect from their party's position on. But I believe that the inability of the state to reach its housing growth goals is causing people to look more distinctly at what is the cause of that. And I want to say that universally, people are seeing prevailing wage as something that increases project costs by about 20% on every project. And so, with that, you're seeing Democrats pull onto the bill, and you're seeing individuals in the community that provide services are willing to come in and testify in support of this bill when traditionally they have not. So the big sea change for me is that people traditionally that would not have touched prevailing wage exemptions in this world specific to housing are seeing where it's keeping us from meeting our goals.
Thank you. And Michael, there's quite a few questions on Senate Bill 1585 in the chat. I see you wanted to answer with them live, so I will pass it back to you on that bill.
Yeah, happy to. So there are a few concerns. I mean, some of the amendments that, like I said, discussing right after this meeting, it really is a narrowing from the original bill that passed the House last session. We are supporting it, actively working with Senator Manning's office to address any concerns. I think big picture, this really ties into one of our number one priority issue areas, which is infrastructure. And I think as we have future biennia in which the financial outlook of the state is not great. I know this is the first time that we're going through some of that. Is a lot of first timers in that is that we really want to have a broader conversation on infrastructure and accessibility to those funds and those programs that help you all achieve what you need to in district. So very much a dynamic, active conversation. That's about it, but happy to follow up one-on-one with anybody if you need to.
Thanks, Michael. And Greg and Scott, we have two questions that would be for you all next. The first one is in regards to House Bill 4010. And then there's another set of questions in regards to House Bill 4094 and 1569. So we'll start with House Bill 4010.
Yeah, 4010. We've been watching this one as it has been introduced in the legislature, kind of trying to see what the intent is. It hasn't been heard yet, so we're still kind of watching it, but just kind of seeing where this one leads us, thinking maybe potentially there could be an interim conversation about change orders.
Thank you. And then Scott, the question is the intent behind those two bills.
The intent on 4094 is, I think it is a narrow concern by some workers that at separation, they had a negative experience and they had accrued more vacation than their policy is allowed to be capped out at. So right now, a lot of cities might cap payout at 200 hours, but allow someone to accrue more usable vacation time. And so I think what they wanted was that the worker would get the full 300 hours payout accrued, even though they didn't take it. And I think the concern we have is that vacation isn't intended to be a bank. It's intended to give people time to go do stuff and have fun and recharge and refresh and take a break. And so incentivizing people to do that is important. I think that's a lot of times we've seen in the building over the years that a legislator had an individual negative experience, and they may perceive that as being more widely felt than it is, and they might drop a bill on it to address that. My understanding is there was a lot of opposition to it. I didn't see a lot of support for it. So we're going to continue to follow that one in and and try to keep it from moving forward. This is a topic we negotiate with our bargaining units. This is a topic that employers manage to address their own financial risk and the needs of their employees. So yeah, that's my take on it. I mean, they didn't really float it with us, so I'm not sure I have a whole lot of insight into the proponents' mindset. And 1569 there was the bill. I only talked about the part of the bill that impacted cities. There are several other. That's about 10 lines of the bill. There are a bunch of other sections that impact other employees. Some state employees. There are people who. I was actually surprised that some of those career fields weren't already in OPSERT, Tier 3 police and fire. So people who act in very much a law enforcement capacity at places like Kingsley Field or protection officers weren't included. Sounded law enforcement-y to me, so I thought they might have been included already. And then the state assistant attorney generals were wanting to get added into that as well. County district associate district attorneys are already in tier OPSERT PNF, but they didn't include the state criminal prosecutors, and so that's between the state and the legislature. But it's when they wrote the bill, and then when you see a bill like that, everybody who's been trying to get onto OPSERT PNF sees an opportunity and they take it. It's sort of like it's been an ongoing battle since the creation of Tier 3 to curb the growth of that, it's designed for people whose careers they need to get out of them early. So it's very expensive for employers. I think with the fiscal I turned in, it's about $10,000 per head, but that can vary widely depending on what the individual PERS rate is.
Thank you, Scott. And we have a follow-up question on House Bill 4094, asking about capping the overall PTO cash out based on length of service.
Yeah, the bill creates a 300-hour, or the amendment will create a 300-hour floor. So an employer could negotiate a different set on their employers, and a lot of employers do have a graduated scale based on years of service. But 300-hour payout would be pretty high, and based on my observation of city policies, I think the bill will have a big fiscal, but we do have to do our work to keep this bottled up.
Thank you. We've reached the end of the questions in the FAQ. We've had folks raise their hands and lower their hands. So I'll be allowing folks to talk that have raised their hands. I just have one person so far that's done so. If there's other questions that folks would like to ask live, now is your chance. Raise that hand and we'll invite you to unmute. All right, well, I'm not seeing anyone come off mute or more questions in the chat. We thank you for joining us this afternoon. This is a fast and furious session. We'll be back with more updates next Friday. If you have questions along the way, please reach out to the appropriate league lobbyists. We're here to support and make sure you have the information you need to make things work in your community.